down the gully tree, 'cause it make the best tea for me. I've seen doctors say it is naturally. One thing the doctor will need a lot of food to survive and go through in Babylon. I got the spark of sensimilla blooming in my. I got the spark of sensimilla blooming in my backyard. Yes, I've walked the streets and seen children downtown, begging everyone they see, and it hurt me. It can be right for what this world do for the youth. Yeah, getting set, getting set. And the little herb I'm selling, they want to different vibes on what I go on today. I and I don't cherish wickedness because it's non-profit. So I and I got the stalk of sense in me, blooming in my backyard. Sounds of Black Uhuru. I got the stalk of sense in me, blooming in my backyard. Anything that is non-profit, I and I don't take for it. Pass it, all over I and I. No need to fret, 'cause I and I shall have life in this. Getting set for what I go on. Bouncing to the sounds of Black Uhuru. I got the stalk of sensimilla blooming in my backyard. I got the stalk of sensimilla blooming in my backyard. There is a red house over yonder full of marijuana. I've been sitting on the corner, chatting up with informer. Yes, dependent. Got the stalk of sensimilla blooming in my backyard. I got the stalk of sensimilla blooming in my backyard. Breathe the herb, little herb. Let's give some more people a few minutes to jump on. Some of us going on like we don't want a thing in life to be going around like world. Yeah, as you jump onto what I go on, give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, something. Different vibes. I got the spark of sensimilla blooming in my backyard. I got the spark of sensimilla blooming in my backyard. People, that's what they mention for marijuana. All right, all right, all right. Sounds of Black Uhuru. All right, greetings, greetings, greetings. Welcome to Wataguan. My name is Donovan Simon. I'm the president for the Jamaican Canadian Association, Alberta, based in Calgary. And Wataguan is our way of connecting to the community, talking about issues that affect our association, our city, our country, Jamaica, and the world. And this evening, we're going to actually talk to what that affect the world to a certain extent. We're going to talk about cannabis, getting the black into it. And we have a number of guests that are in the wings that are going to join us in a little bit
to share some perspective, some information on this, not just the plant, but the industry, the opportunities, and a range of other things. But of course, before we get into that, we have to do the staples of Watagwan. And the first of that is the Patwa word of the day. When I was thinking about this one, the Patwa word for today is paro, right? Paro. So if you were in Jamaica and you were using this Patwa word in a sentence, you would say something like, boy, the man drink a juice and bun a spliff and him just a paro, right? So for those who understand what the Patwa word paro means, right, put it in the comment section so those who don't know can benefit from understanding what paro means, right? I want to share some information on things that are coming up, right? So let me get some information up here so that what's happening next. We have a general meeting that's coming up on the 28th of November. It's going to start at 7 p.m. It's going to be at the Winston Heights Community Center, 520 27th Avenue Northeast, Calgary. Starts at 7 o'clock, like I said. We'll also have a virtual option. It will be on Zoom. So if you are on our mailing list, you will get the Zoom credentials to join the meeting. Starts at 7, and this is our last general meeting for the year. Lots of updates, especially on our building renovation project. So if you could jump on, that would be great. Getting your affairs in order. They have another webinar that's coming up next Tuesday, November 24th. It's at 11 a.m. If you go on Facebook or Instagram, search for Getting Your Affairs in Order, and you'll be able to register and attend this very informative session about preparing for the inevitable. The last couple of weeks, I have been talking about what's happening on our building, and I want to continue to make that appeal. We need your assistance. We're asking for your help to make this happen, to get us across the finish line, as we said. Today I went in there and the mechanical guys were in, our furnace is installed, and they're fitting it all up. By next week, hopefully, we can get our drywallers to finish what is happening, and then we can get painting and get this place ready for use this year. We've got a GoFundMe going. If you could jump on and make a small donation, a big one too, we would surely appreciate it. Another initiative as part of our fundraising program is the Helping Hands program, which allows you to be represented on the donor wall in the building. We've got a 16 by 14 wall that's dedicated to recognizing our donors. A number of different categories, and there's even one for members where you can get your nameplate on that wall, right, as a donor. So please either jump on the GoFundMe and help us out, or a bigger donation and jump on the donor wall in the different categories. And there are a number of benefits to supporting us through the Helping Hands program. Of course, if you have questions and you want to contact us, jump on our website. You can send us an email, leave us a message on the phone, jump on our social media handles, send us a DM. We'll definitely respond to you, right? Whether it's about the association, what's happening in the city, and also if you have questions about how you can support the fundraising initiative, right, to get us across the finish line for our building. Again, we're asking for your help. It's a special appeal. Help us cross the finish line. We've gotten this far, right? Give us a little push. For those who just joined, the Patwa word of the day is paro, right? So a man might drink some juice and, bun a spliff, as we'd say in Jamaica, and him just chill and paro, right? We're going to talk about cannabis and getting the black into it. And I have a couple of guests in the wings that I want to bring on. So let me bring them on. Nicole, if you can unmute, that would be great. There we go.
Hello.
Greetings. How you doing? Sheldon, I know you joined. if I can get your audio. Are you on?
Yeah, man, greetings.
Greetings, brother. I can share the video to you, because you know it go right.
Yeah,
Uh,
the video I try and share, but
all right, there we
kind of
go.
busy.
There we go. There we go. It'll take time work itself in. All right, welcome to Wataguan. Welcome to Wataguan. Today we're going to talk about cannabis. Some people call it ganja, marijuana. If you're in Jamaica, we have a whole heap of name for it.
Yes.
I grade sense media. I should. I will go down the list, right? Before we get into the discussion, for those who are watching, I want to put some context around this, right? So, in terms of Canada, a couple of years ago, uh, legalized the use of cannabis. Jamaica did the same thing in 2015. The numbers I saw around Canada said that the industry is turning around about $200 million a month, right? So in 2019, it contributed a little under $9 billion to Canada's GDP, and the projections is that it's going to be about $15 billion in 2020, and by 2025, it's somewhere in the $40 billion. It's a huge industry. Are the projections from an economic perspective is that it's going to be a huge industry in Canada. There are 15 states in the US that have already legalized the use of cannabis, and the industry continues to grow in that country. In fact, their projections are even greater than that of Canada, right? So we want to get into that discussion around, the different sides of it, right? And maybe, before I get into the question, let me introduce the guest. So Sheldon Reed is the acting senior legal officer for the Cannabis Licensing Authority in Jamaica, right? Big up, boss. Welcome.
Give thanks, give thanks, give
All
thanks.
right. And Nicole Hines is the founder and I'll call you CEO of Faded
Yes.
Living, right? An
Yes. Yeah.
entrepreneur in the cannabis space. So
Yes.
maybe I'll start with you, Nicole. This whole legalization and decriminalization has created economic opportunities, right?
Mhm.
So let's start with that, because you have entered into that space. What are you seeing, and what are some of the opportunities?
Well, there are opportunities in the space. I mean, you know me from Calgary. I used to live in Calgary for quite some time. And then when I moved to Vancouver 3 years ago, I moved here specifically to get into the industry. I was following what was going on with cannabis, and I felt like this is an industry. If white people were going to make money off of this industry, Black people needed to do it tenfold. That was just my mentality, and that's why I moved out here. But what I learned in my time in the industry is first I had to get my feet wet. I worked in a dispensary. I didn't. I mean, all I knew about the plant was smoking it because I am a consumer from time, and I also became a medical patient about 5.5 years ago because I had a car accident. So I kind of knew it that way, but I didn't know about what selling it was like and how to deal
Right.
with the clientele and all that jazz. So I got into that, got some experience, and then I worked for a licensed producer. I worked for Aurora Cannabis, one of the big giants, and that was a way of getting into the industry, making a good living, and working that corporate structure. But to be the Aurora, you had to have a lot of money. And to
Yeah.
have a lot of money, you technically were a cis white male
Right.
who had a lot of money. So unfortunately, I see a lot of us entering into the space, but we're on the smaller level right now
Right.
because we don't have the big dollars to play the way those giants are playing, right?
And that's a good segue to bring Sheldon in, because he's part of the licensing authority in Jamaica. Sheldon, talk to us about some of the regulatory and legal framework, especially in Jamaica, because for a long time, people have planted weed, right? But what was happening is that it was illegal.
Right.
And here's now an opportunity and a framework that has been built. And Felicia is joining us as we speak. Talk to us about the framework in Jamaica, please.
All right. So yeah, you're quite right that our culture and specifically speaking, or music, things tied to reggae, things tied to Rastafari, things tied to our folk use. of cannabis have always suggested that we treated it as the healing of the nation.
Mhm.
And so I think pretty much our culture is one throughout the ages, well over 100 years since prohibition, initially in 1930. We were the first country in the Caribbean to actually prohibit ganja in the books in 1913. Fast forward some 100 years later, since then, and fast forward some 100 years later, we've been using it as a medicine. So, I mean, where we are now is that the law has caught up to what the people have already known, what the people have already seen, and what we've recognized explicitly in our music and our culture as ganja, as medicine, as the healing nation. We if we're talking about the legislative framework, literally, it is so crafted to be compliant with our international obligations.
Okay.
So that is why you will hear us refer to the single convention, which is this overarching umbrella of a convention that all countries who are parties to that convention must ensure that however they're handling cannabis is in keeping with that convention. And that convention is what sets out that we must, if we're going to be handling cannabis, handle it for medicinal purposes only.
Okay.
Jamaica has been liberal in its approach somewhat, however, as we have said, that not only do we recognize the medicinal benefit of it, but we also see it as a sacrament. So
Right.
Rastafari is allowed to have any amount of cannabis on their person at any point in time, and the law more or less sees it as a sacrament. So a person of the Rastafari faith can use it as a sacrament. And in addition, we also allow each household in Jamaica to grow up to 5 plants. So,
and it no matter how tall the plant be.
No man, it no matter how tall or short. Once it's not a man, the male plants are not welcomed in the ganja industry.
All right.
So that would set the overall context more or less as to what we have. But again, for the purposes of today's discussion, and myself and Miss Bailey, our focus is on the medicinal cannabis.
Okay.
And so that part of the framework is what we're speaking on today.
All right, perfect. Felicia, welcome to the program. You have to unmute.
Yes, sorry. Sorry to be late, but for some reason, as soon as I was to come on, my internet went, but it's back, so I'm here.
Yeah, man. All right. No worries. That's good. Welcome. And Felicia is the Director for Research, Development, and Communications with the Cannabis Licensing Authority in Jamaica, right? So let's talk a little bit about getting the message across, because and I'm going to ask you kind of a two-pronged question. One is, talk to us about the licensing framework, right? Because there's a whole lot of money per acre if you want to get into the business, but also the message to the regular farmer out there and the regular consumer, the man who just usually, burn a spliff on the roadside. What are some of the things that people in Jamaica need to know about this whole industry?
Okay, so I'm not sure, I came in a little bit late, so I'm not sure where Mr. Reed left it, but we can say that there are 5 types of licenses. Yeah. Because most persons really just think about cultivation when they hear about the cannabis industry, but it's more than just cultivation. So we have cultivation, we have retail, transport, research and development, and which one am I missing, Mr. Reed?
Retail,
processing.
Transport, processing, yeah.
Processing. So those are the 5 types.
Spa as well. We also have the spa.
Spa the spa type, we call it retail therapeutics, so it falls under retail. So under each of these 5 types, there are some subcategories. So when this was conceptualized, and we were really doing it without any there was nothing to go from our own context, which is very different from anywhere else in the world, right? So they wrote it in such a way where they were really trying to ensure that there was some level of inclusion. So within these different types of licenses, there were some further subcategories. So the cultivator tier 1 license, which allows you to cultivate up to 1 acre, was originally meant for the most of the smaller farmers. So you'd find that to be the most affordable license type. The fee for that license type, I believe it's $2,000 US per year. So that was a more you know, more for the smaller man. The other
Mhm.
tier 2 and tier 3 is no, that is done per acre, and it is upwards of, I think 3,000 US per acre. So we really were trying to carve a little space there for the smaller persons. But we have realized that within our context, even though it may seem, because what they did to come about those fees, they did go across the island and do some sensitizations and get feedback, and it was agreed that this type of fee would be suitable. But we now realize in our own context, 5 years on, that some persons are still unable. We do have some persons who would consider themselves to be small man and small farmers in the industry, cultivating and doing other things. But we realize that some other persons want to come in who can't. And Mr. Reed could speak more on this, something that we conceptualized this year that we are now working through, which is a cultivators transitional special permit. And this permit now will be another arrangement that would allow persons at the grassroots level to gain access to the industry. And through this program now, they'll have about 2 years to build out their facilities to come to the level of a license, of a full license.
Right.
So we're trying to do more things to get more inclusion, because we understand that without inclusion, we won't succeed.
Well,
So,
I like where you're going with the inclusion concept, and I'm going to bring Nicole in and come back, because I want to talk a little bit about the alternative development plan that I see on your website and stuff like that. So, Nicole, you've worked with Aurora, and you have a couple of these guys who are listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange, making money. How does the Jamaican structure compare to the Canadian structure in terms of small man coming into it?
The Jamaican structure is tenfold amazing. We have nothing like that in Canada. I believe that when we legalized 2 years ago, we should have created a cannabis social equity program so that people who were marginalized communities that were affected by the war on drugs, which we also had in this country, that they could have either been set up with as a mentorship program with companies like an Aurora, where they got assistance with filling out their applications, maybe assistance with the fees, because it is a lot of fees. It's a lot of fees for setting up your space and all the, the security, etc. But we didn't create anything like that. In fact, it was more fast-tracked for the ones who had money. And so what Jamaica is doing is tenfold exactly what, a country like us should have created when we legalized.
Okay, so that's an interesting point, because I'm coming back to Sheldon here in terms of the legal and regulatory framework and its intention. So is it intended to regulate the outcome of economic activity, or are there some social components to the framework?
Well, as I set up a question, but I'm gonna handle it like a big man, right?
All right.
I do think, if I'm to be honest with you, my friend, all regulators will tell you that in crafting policy, you must consider the social aspects of it. So no good regulator can implement any policy and not be mindful of the social implications, certainly, but most importantly, in our context, sometimes it's the ramifications. So if you put out something, especially that is not good as it relates to ganja, which is so sensitive to our people at the grassroots, then you run the risk of actually being counterintuitive to the government's intended purpose of regulating a space and driving people from the illicit to the legal. So what we've had to do, whilst we've tried to incorporate the grassroots, the persons who are at the cusp of what we've been doing for, I said, well over 100 years, is ensure that at the same time we are balancing the fact that Jamaica has unfortunately had a negative reputation as it relates to the illicit trade. So we have had to be very strict as far as the checks and balances in our license regime. So our licensees will tell you that they have to account for each plant. Each plant is tagged from seed to sale. We must account for it. The INCB visited us last year. I think it was November, and they were very much pleased. The International Narcotics Control Board, who is our, call it if you will,
your regulator.
yeah, or regulator. And they were quite pleased with what we have. And as a regulator, that is good, but more so as a businessman, that is better, because
Right.
if you have passed approval of your international regulator, that says to international investors who have the capital to put the kind of technology that medicinal cannabis needs in order to compete globally at
Right.
ease. Because they're
Right.
saying, okay, if they invest their money in this industry, they
Mhm.
can rest assured that it will stand to global scrutiny.
Right. Right.
So that would kind of set the context as to what we're trying to balance. Where we
Oh,
are today, just to say quickly, where we are today, as Miss Bailey would have said, is that we're now trying to place more impetus on transitioning people who don't have the financial means right now to participate at the what the industry calls for, because it calls for technology, it calls for capital, clearly, because you have to have standard goods that
mhm.
provide
Mhm.
a consistent basis. So we're now trying to lobby the government. We're asking for incentives to incorporate people in, and through this transitional permit that Miss Bailey would have referred to, we're literally giving the grassroots man who have up to 1 acre land some fencing for preventing
Mhm.
from coming, and some other little checks and balances that we'll work on. We give him 2 years. 2 years at half the cost of what he would pay to get a tier 1 license. So that 2 years at
It would
less
work out to be about 25% because instead of paying annually, you would pay the
so,
amount of money is for 2 years.
so
Okay.
that
Okay.
2 years at roughly $550
Okay.
for him to be able to cultivate and sell his ganja to either a licensed cultivator or a licensed processor.
Okay. Felicia, I'm going to bring you in on this because as the person responsible for R&D and communication in that board, some of what I'm assuming is driving is a varied approach to the industry, right? So it's not just about, it's not banana, you're not just going to farm it and sell it, right? There is the idea of value added. Is that part of the role of the CLA?
Not really, but what we do though, we try to ensure that the industry, my job is to ensure that the authority has an understanding of what is happening with the industry worldwide, because I have to clarify, it's not research and development, but it's research development. So
Okay.
we'll try to keep up to date as to what is happening with the industry worldwide, and also what is happening with our industry locally, doing research around that industry and following our numbers, tracking our numbers to see what is happening so that we can make informed decisions, research-based decisions. So our decisions are informed and not just off the top of our head. So that's what I do. So,
Okay.
I mean, so for example, but still in line kind of with what you have said, we are looking at other things. How can we use the waste products from the cannabis? What are, so we are looking wide, near and far to see how we can further develop the industry.
All right. So as you talk about developing the industry, Nicole, I'm going to come back to you because you have a little company called Faded Living.
Yes.
and I know you from long time because of food, right?
Yes. And I'm still doing food. I'm still doing food.
Jamaican food.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit about Faded Living and how the whole cannabis thing now start falling into another opportunity as it relates to food.
Absolutely. So basically, Faded Living is a lifestyle brand to normalize adult cannabis use. And by doing that, I'm showing you that there are many different ways to consume the plant, not just by smoking it, although that is my favorite way to consume. I've learned over time, especially when you're using cannabis therapeutically as well as the recreational side of things, because the way I view the plant is that I direct it to do whatever I want to do it before I consume it. If my back is hurting and I puff, then my back is going to be chill. If I want to be creative and I puff, and so on and so forth. So I created this company where I will be teaching, doing virtual cooking workshops and having virtual dinner parties. I used to do in person before COVID. I did actual infused dinner parties where I would teach people how I create oil, and then I would cook a Jamaican infused meal, and then we break bread together and eat, and then we also smoke after, and sort of that's the sort of thing. So I'll launch a cookbook, I will do a podcast, and kind of do a lot of things to show that adult cannabis use is just as normal as adult alcohol use.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of the mandate. There's a lot of things that you can do in the industry. And one thing I wanted to stress is that when you want to get into the cannabis industry, it's not just anything dealing with the plant, it's all of the businesses that support the plant.
Yeah.
You know, all the packaging, all the nutrients, all the, you know, there's just so many other things. And any profession that you have in the quote unquote regular world, you can do in the cannabis world. If you're a lawyer, you can be a lawyer that deals with cannabis. If you are an accountant, etc. Right? So there's so many ways to be a part of the industry and kind of get that bread, so to speak, you know.
And I think that's a key message that people watching this show and the video should get, that the industry has the potential. Like I said, the forecast is that in Canada alone is a $25 billion industry in a few years, which means it creates economic activity across a whole spectrum. And, you know, part of when we do this program is to say to Black people, listen, there is a space in it that you should look at, right? And it's not just about a spliff, right?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I'd love to maybe get Felicia or Sheldon to talk about is the whole structure of the industry in Jamaica, right? And whether or not the way the industry sets itself up will lead to the optimization of that opportunity. And this is an opinion question, I know, right? Because, you know, somebody like Dr. Lowe from Blue Cross has been doing cannabis research for years, right? And, you know, with a structure around it now and as a regulator, you know, how do you think that is being seen out there, right? Because I think you mentioned that a little earlier, Felicia. Wait, what's your thought?
You're asking if the industry, how it is set up to be able to capitalize on the markets and the opportunities that exist?
All the benefits that Jamaica has. So we have good climate. Jamaica is supposed to be rated up there with the best weed in the world. But we also have good researchers. We have a good regulatory framework. We have good access to markets, right?
Okay, so yeah, right. So you're on the right track. So what I would say is that we have the history, we have the brand, and now we have added through the CLA the regulatory framework. And this regulatory framework, it facilitates persons entering the industry, and it also facilitates persons being able to access markets externally, including just this year, the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, they published there are about 7 standards for the cannabis industry. So we're bringing everything together to set up Jamaica to be able to access those markets. I mean, generally speaking, there are other issues that affects us being able to access those markets. Some right now are out of our control, but we're still doing our best to ensure that once those doors are open, once we break those glass ceilings, then we are ready to take the market. Because I know for a fact, no matter how much ganja is being produced in Canada, the USA, Israel, anywhere across the world, once a shop puts up that they have Jamaican ganja, just by stamping the word Jamaican on it, it makes a world of difference. And as you read the researchers, now we have the standards, we have the regulatory framework, and that regulatory framework allows us to be able to trade with other countries who have similar regulatory frameworks through the single convention. So the door is really open. It's just for there's some small kinks that are stopping us. I mean, so far, we started to export in 2018. We've been facilitating exports. So, I mean, a lot of persons are saying that we don't have export regulations. Those export regulations, I think we're on a last draft now. Mr. Reed can correct me if I'm wrong. But even in the absence of those regulatory frameworks for export and import, transport, and transshipment right now, our licensees do have that ability to export. So if there's any company in Canada that really wants to import some Canadian ganja, secure an import permit from Health Canada, link yourself with a licensee in Jamaica, and the CLA will facilitate that export. We have facilitated every single licensee who has come to us with one of those import permits, because we're in the business of ensuring that we're not only here to regulate, or our regulatory framework was set up a little bit different in terms of how our mandate is. We have also have a responsibility for the development, to facilitate the development of the industry. And for that reason, we're very customer focused. And that is even more so now that we're on the path to being ISO 9001 certified. So we're very customer focused, and we are trying to ensure that our businesses, the persons who have invested their money, the persons who saw this green gold and say, yes, I think I can do something with this. We are in the business of ensuring that these persons are able to access markets. So we want to kick down some doors and push in, because I know that once we get our foot in, there's no stopping us.
All right. And one of the things I noticed on your website is that y'all already issued 68 licenses, and the number
We're
that
now at
70 licenses, and there were 331 what you call those now?
Conditional approval.
Conditional approvals, which suggests that there's quite a bit of activity. Question for you though is this, how much of this is local people, in entrepreneurs, where's this coming from?
Mr. Reid will back me up on this. What our drafters did when they were drafting our regulations, they ensured that persons coming in the industry, any company that is applying, you must be registered with the Companies Office of Jamaica, and the controlling interest. What's the word for it, Mr. Reid? Substantial ownership and control must be 51% Jamaican persons who are ordinarily resident in Jamaica. So the drafters try to ensure that Jamaica holds the handle of the knife.
I think
that way.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Reid. You can finish from me, because I know you're even more capable of answering than I am.
No, there's just to complement what Ms. Bailey is saying. What we require is not just that majority of the company that would own the license, because an individual can apply for a tier 1 cultivator's license. All other licenses must be owned by a company that is registered in Jamaica, duly registered, which means that it would have to be compliant with its taxes and all of that. But most importantly, we want to ensure that the revenue that is made from the company, that at least 51% of same, presumably, is staying within our borders. So we ask that at least 51% of the company be owned, but importantly also be controlled by persons who are ordinarily resident to Jamaica. So we're not just talking about, yes, the money, but also decisions that are being made.
Right.
So no decision that is we and I'm glad that we're having this conversation in the context of the diaspora. Yeah. Because we do want the diaspora to get more involved. Yesterday I was at a conference. Just to go back to the question that you asked Miss Bailey about currently how we're poised. I was at a conference at the Montego Bay where we were discussing health and wellness tourism and the role that cannabis plays in health and wellness. So now, because of COVID, the context of tourism has had to shift. Data shows that the average agricultural sector contributes at least 10% GDP to GDP. Right. Our agricultural sector is contributing below that. We're actually below that average. We're contributing 6%, and coffee and I believe cocoa has fell down by 40% since COVID. Right. So you're seeing that the agricultural sector could contribute more to GDP, and the crops that we normally rely on in the agricultural sector are now at a decline because of tourism being down. Your tourist would like his cocoa, she will like her coffee, that sort of thing. So that demand is no longer there. But interesting enough, where the market is constant and you're seeing a growing interest is in cannabis. Right. Yes, things are slow, but things are not as slow in the medicinal cannabis arena. More people are now, actually research shows that tobacco sales have increased. And I'm sure that, people, their alternatives to tobacco now, people will tell you that there are way more medicinal benefits for cannabis as opposed to tobacco. With the Democrats being now elected, presumably
Hold on. Yeah, careful.
their investors lined up now because the Democrats are anticipated as being more pro-liberal when it comes to cannabis. So you have a huge amount of shareholders lining up to say, yeah, man, we're gonna be pumping some capital soon. So these are already markets that Jamaica can and ready opportunities. I think that Jamaica is more than poised. Miss Bailey will tell you, we're just the standards. So we're not just a do ganja no more. We're past them levels there right now.
We're the business.
Standardize.
Yeah.
So
all right. I have two more questions before we get into the wrap up. And I'll start with you, Nicole. There was a time when the perception about weed and the use thereof was, I'm going to say, negative. With decriminalization and legalization, and there's a growing sense of one acceptance of its medicinal value, which long-time Rastaman has said, boy, I don't know if you use the thing, the herbs and blah, 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 right? How far do you think we are in Canada as it relates to that perception in terms of the change and the acceptance and the appreciation of its value?
I still think we have a long way to go. And mainly because there's two streams of people. There are the people that have always consumed before legalization. And so the fact that it's legalization, it's just much easier to access the product. Whereas there are the people who felt negatively about cannabis, and still, even though it's been 2 years, it still hasn't shifted. And because Health Canada puts a lot of regulations on the marketing of cannabis and speaking on the health benefits of the plant, a lot of people who may have had different kind of views towards it, it won't change unless they start to see regular people using it and being, successful people, etc., business people, etc., using it, right? So there's just a long way to go because we don't have the ability to market in the same way that alcohol does. Right. And so that is part of the reason why I started my company. But even on certain socials, for instance, Facebook, it was a prime example. I'm part of a Facebook group that is for women who use cannabis for medical reasons, let's say, and they were being shut down. A lot of their posts were being removed because somebody had reported them. Right. And because for us, yes, Canada is legal, but we also share it on a US platform, which is not legal. Right. And so we still have to deal with that a lot of times. It happens on Instagram, it happens on TikTok, it happens so you have to be really creative. Sometimes I use the word cannabis, sometimes I don't. I use words like elevated, things like that.
4-2.
Absolutely. To keep it out there. I mean, one thing I will say real quick is that I am also co-founder of a nonprofit called Louder Together Cannabis Advocacy Society. And the whole idea of that group is to ensure that Black and Indigenous and people of color have their voices amplified in this cannabis space. So if they, the intent is to have mentorship programs, leadership programs, that type of support for people to ensure that they can speak in those rooms that are filled with white males and have that confidence to kind of, be at the table, but still for the time being, the perception is not as good as it could be, right? And I just think that the more that we're allowed to showcase the everyday, regular people using it and how beneficial it is to our lives, the better that we can change the stigma and the perception.
Yeah, I completely appreciate that view. Just to quickly say, because it's the irony is that we face the same kind of challenge in Jamaica. You walk into I'm the regulator. I work for the regulator, and I walk into a store or a mall or wherever for lunch, and if I have on a branded shirt, you do get stares. And some of the stares are, okay, what do you do? It's interesting, and some stares are judgment. But importantly, if the use of it becomes more, everyday normal, you realize it's actually functioning people who are pretty smart.
Absolutely.
The product for medicinal benefits, them not paro. You realize the thing is, it changes the perception and it helps to
Right,
change the way
Absolutely.
we're taking it as a medicine very seriously.
right,
Absolutely.
So
right.
I fully applaud your effort of kind of big brothering and big sistering those who are in the space and know like the traditional knowledge of it, but they're unafraid to kind of step up and speak about it because the space is becoming too pharmaceutical.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think we need something like that in Jamaica. We actually really do need something like that in Jamaica.
All right.
Yeah,
So
I'm
what
in
is some?
agreement. I'm in agreement because I like the word that Nicole put at the end. That's the right word, the stigma. As Mr. Reed says, when I go to lunch, I literally have to walk with my ID turned on the back. I have to have something on the back to cover because there's so many people staring. And literally, I get asked this question every day. Oh, so you guys are up there high. There's a stigma that we need more persons like Nicole who are literally showing, this is medicine, this is therapy.
Absolutely.
It can be used safely, but just like any other thing, overuse will cause adverse effects.
Absolutely.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
thank you, Nicole.
Got
No,
the same thing happen with sugar,
Exactly.
And coffee, well, no, let me not discuss.
Don't beat up the coffee.
All right,
I have one last question for Felicia. Here in Alberta, we have something called the Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis Commission, which regulates in Alberta. And one of the things that comes out of that agency is funding for social programs and nonprofits and other social organizations. Is there anything like that with the CLA? And is there any thought about how the proceeds from the regulatory framework will go back into social programs?
Yes, and Mr. Reed can also back me up on this one.
Yeah, man.
So our regulations, how it was framed, there's a percentage of the money that we make per year that goes to the
National Council on Drug Abuse. Yeah.
Right, NCDA, which is National Council on Drug Abuse, and I believe there's also a portion that goes to the Scientific Research Council that should help with research. So we have it's twofold. But you said something interesting. In Canada, it's regulated by the in Alberta, liquor and gambling. You see, that is a part of the stigma. That whole framing, putting all of those together, it is contributing to the stigma. Right there, you can tell from the beginning there was a stigma. But anyhow, I'm going off point. So yes, there are those considerations where from we were writing, I find our drafters to be, they were very forward thinking. So they did think of that from before, and the National Council on Drug Abuse, they do get a portion of whatever the CLA earns annually, and some other organizations as well.
And they do ask for it, I can tell you. They don't make
All right, listen, this has been an awesome discussion. I hope a ton of people watch the program and watch this video because I think it's important to demystify the whole issue of the cannabis industry and get some black into it, because I think we don't want it to go like bauxite or sugar or bananas, where after a while the bulk of the benefits and profits went elsewhere, right? I think especially with our brand, we have to make sure our high grade reach the highest level. Right, and we get the most from it. All right, Nicole, Felicia, Sheldon, thank you all for joining Watagoan and sharing different perspectives.
Thank you. Blessings.
Nice talking to you. It was short and spicy. I love it.
Yeah, it was perfect. Thank you.
Invite us again anytime.
Right.
All right. I remember. I'm going to take you up on that.
All right. Nice speaking
All right.
with you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Take care. All right. I tell you, Watagoan take on a different vibes tonight. Listen, before we leave the program, there are a couple of things I want to make sure everybody know. The patois word of today was paro, right? So for those who don't know, is paro, right? Find it somewhere, right? And make sure you put it in the comment section, right? The other thing I want to make sure that everybody knows is we're going to continue this next week. We're going to do another Watagoan. And next week, we're going to talk about the state of reggae and dancehall in Canada. We have Progress and Mali Bless and Steel and to come on the show and talk about what's happening with Jamaican music and Jamaican music culture in Canada. The week after, we're going to take a new look at the pandemic. But since it's December, we're going to look at how to celebrate the holidays in the face of the pandemic. I want to throw out an invitation for the program on December 11th. We're going to talk about 2020, what a year. And if you're open to come on the program and talk about your perspective of 2020, which by any stretch of the imagination has been one of the most interesting ones in recent times, right? Send me a DM or something, and we'll get you on the program. Remember to share, remember to like, remember to jump on our social media handles and provide us with some feedback. I have to leave the program with a reminder that we've got our GoFundMe. We're asking kindly for some support as we get across the finish line and on our building renovation project. And for those who want to get themselves on our impressive donor wall, and I promise you, when you see it, you'll consider it impressive. Jump on our website, all the details are there. I'm going to end the show kind of in the same way that we started with Jamaican reggae music, as I always talked about ganja and the weed. So here is Marlon Asher. Take care, stay safe until next time. All right? Well, good.
Summer ganja planter, call me the ganja farmer. Deep down in the earth, me put the ganja. Babylon come and light it at a fire, me a can. The summer ganja planter, call me the ganja farmer. Deep down in the earth, me put the ganja. Babylon come. Big stinking helicopter flow through the air. With them call it weed eater. Them never did it when me was out in water. Or when me did in blind fertilizer. Yet out of